All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us this morning here in Clermont County. As I do a couple times each year, I spend a few minutes just catching up with providers, families, individuals, just to kind of share some of the latest things that are happening in Clermont County and just to answer any questions that folks may have as we go. So I am going to work on getting our presentation going. Little different this year, obviously, based on the circumstances in which we face. Certainly since March, our world has been turned upside down, and as everyone is quite aware. So typically I've done these presentations in person. We usually do them in a community site in our county, but obviously based on the circumstances we're faced with this year, we decided to do it virtually, and we're excited to have the option to be able to do it. So just a few things before we get started, which everyone has done a fantastic job of already. For just purposes of kind of the background noise of the session, if you can put yourself on mute, that would be great, just for the sake of cutting back on some of the background noise that sometimes might occur. If you have, and then related to questions, if you have a specific question related to anything that I'm sharing or anything that's kind of on your mind, please feel free to we'll have an opportunity at the end of the presentation for questions. But if there is something specific related to something that's maybe on the screen, you can use the chat box, and Lisa Davis, who is our community relations person, can help me kind of monitor that. And also, I believe there's Lisa. So be able to also, there's an option to raise your hand if you go into settings there to be able to do that as well. One of the things related to questions that based on the circumstances, we are recording this so that we can put it out there for others to watch if they weren't able to join us this morning. If there's something very individually specific, I would just ask, we definitely want to answer all your questions and be able to check in on any situation that you may be dealing with in your particular arena. But if it's something pretty specific, it might be just for privacy's sake, we may want to do that in a different forum. And certainly I'll have my contact information at the end of this presentation if you'd like to send me an email or call me about something more specific. I'm trying to keep this more in the realm of kind of systemic and kind of areas that we are seeing kind of on a systemic basis within kind of our new environment. So with that being said, I will go ahead and jump into our presentation, and we'll go from there. So the way I usually have always started these, again, I use the months of July and November to have these sessions. Usually in the month of July, our board takes a month off. Not this month though, because we took a month off in March based on kind of pivoting related to the COVID crisis. And we weren't quite prepared yet for online meetings, so the board decided to take the month of March off and come back in July. So I usually have used the month of July for that purpose, for the purposes of doing this, and then also the month of November, because typically that's when we have met with our board, talked about the next year's planning cycle, and that's a time I can share with individuals, families, providers, kind of some of the things on our radar. What I'm going to share in the next few screens are very high level kinds of goals and to-do items that have been on our list since really the end of last year, going into this year, from different departmental levels. Again, these are very high level, kind of not really in the weeds too much, but if you again have questions, obviously let us know. But certainly when I jump off, the very first screen is in the community support services arena. So and I bulleted out some things that were on our radar towards the end of last year heading into this year. First and foremost, and I'll have another screen or another slide related to Fix the List. So, and I'll speak to this in a little bit more detail as I pull up that slide later. But one of the things that obviously we are still working on, which was work that we started back in 2018 as a result of a rule change related to the waiver waiting list, is the Fix the List process. So again, in very general terms, for many, many years, the waiver waiting list got very, very large based on the fact that it was really not so much based on a person's either specific or identified needs immediately, or even within the next year. It was maybe a need I might need maybe 10 or 15 years down the line. I'm going to go ahead and get my name on the list, because certainly that was an encouraged practice. And what we found across the state was that waiting list really got to the point that it was unwieldy and really not as effective as what it really needed to be. So there was a large process and a large effort that was put underway with many, many stakeholders, including individuals and families, that revisited that back in 2016, 2017. And as a result, a rule change and effective new process came out in 2018 that really created a new assessment to gauge really kind of where folks' needs are, either immediate or current, meaning something that might be needed in the next year. And so with that, we have spent in Clermont County and in every county across the state, have spent the better part of 2 years working through that process. And we are in the 8th quarter of a 9-quarter process to work on what would be defined as fixing the list. We had about 800 and some odd folks that we had the responsibility of meeting with to really kind of go through that assessment. And as mentioned, we are right on track to complete that by the end of this year. Kudos to Debbie Donahue, who is on this call. She is our point person for this. Elizabeth Moran, her supervisor, obviously has been also on this call, has been a huge factor in making all this come together. And obviously all of our SSAs, because we did ask all of our SSAs if there were particular folks on the list that were on their caseload, they had the responsibility of conducting that assessment and kind of working through that. So we are in the process of managing through that, and as mentioned, in the 8th quarter of a 9-quarter process, and we're right on track for completing that by the end of this year. Some other things on our radar for this year really had to do a lot with, I'll jump to actually the 3rd bullet, which is our individual budget transition. So for years in Clermont County, we have had a locally funded program called the Individual Budget Program. And that was a locally funded program to help individuals who initially it was designed around the fact of maybe I was an adult, I had an interest in attending or having something to do during the day, be it a day program, but maybe something, maybe the day programs that were out there, I didn't have quite the interest in, or I'd like to really be able to do something more creative. And so we designed a program many years ago here that allowed for that process to take place. And it was done with an SSA helping that individual to plan and to figure out how to really self-direct some funds to be able to help meet some of those desires or needs. One of the things we recognized, as we've talked about over the past couple of years, is we're operating in almost like a dual system now, in which we have waiver funded services and locally funded services. And we felt like at this point in the history and where we are as an agency, to run those programs in duality seemed kind of counterintuitive, based on the fact that if many of those individuals were waiver eligible, that maybe it made sense for us to transition those folks into waiver services, and then be much more consistent across our agency in relation to how that worked. And so that was a large number of individuals that we are looking to transition throughout this year into a waiver funded service. And so that is as you can imagine, a lot, again, work on our community support services staff, and not only them, but our Medicaid department as well, because we're talking about well over 100 new waiver enrollments for folks that are in that category. So that is a large project that we've been working on throughout the year. It is on track, which again is a testament based on the circumstances in which we've had to pivot into, and I'll talk more about some of the pivoting we've done related to some of the coronavirus efforts. But again, a testament to our staff in that department to be able to continue that process. I'm going to lump the number 2 bullet point and the number 5 bullet point, charting life course and services for transition age students, kind of lumping those together. Again, one of the things that has been quite evident when we have looked out into the landscape of Clermont County is, how are we doing not only in relation to working with our local school district partners, but working with our transition age youth to really get a sense for, one, how many of those kids are out there potentially needing some level of service, what does that service look like, and are we prepared for that number? So we have spent a couple years looking at that, making sure that we've really modified our way of doing business to make sure we're not missing any students in that or kids in that area. And so it is a situation that we have actually hired an SSA that is specifically their whole sole charge is working with that particular population. And really, we've kind of looked at this across the department to model our SSA services on how do we capture and be able to meet or be able to at least have a good handle on what different age group level of needs might look like, and having a staff or someone that is a connection point for those individuals and families, if nothing else, just to be able to, again, have that connection point so that people know that we obviously are here. We want to hear what different experiences they might be having at the various age grouping levels, especially in the kid arena or the child arena. So we have spent some time, and I know the Community Support Services Department has spent time kind of revamping how they're looking at that. And our goal is to use charting the life course as the tool to help to really implement and use that tool effectively to help those individuals and families with really identifying what are some of the things in my life that I would like to pursue and how am I going to get there. It's a great tool. We've had a number of staff trained on that, and it's something that we're adopting and continuing to work on adopting as we move forward. So I kind of lump those two together as areas of concentration. And then finally, while we're talking about transition from the individual budget, we also don't want to lose the fact that we have a lot of family support service type services, locally funding options that really are very, very helpful for many individuals and families across our county. And while they're not what I would identify as life-changing in terms of the amounts, they can be very important from the sense of there's some very specific needs for those particular individuals and families throughout the year that if they did not have them, it would be life-changing and would probably really have some, place some challenges that to this point without those would be unheard. So that is something that we are obviously wanting to continue and make sure that we're focused on moving forward. These are very high level. So again, in terms of, I've lumped some departments kind of together just for purposes of our time this morning. Early intervention and school age, we have two new leaders in those departments, and I think they're both on the line today. Jody Bailey, who is our school age principal, and then Beth Martin, who is our early intervention director. And both of them have been instrumental in, they have, within the last year, again, I've shared this on multiple occasions and I'm not afraid to share it again in relation to what they have had to adjust to in this environment and in this time. It's just incredible. So it's a testament to their leadership skills and their ability to really kind of shift things on the fly in relation to what we're doing. But going into this year, it was a situation, obviously, to look at new ways to implement technology, which has been put to the test right away with various things in the early intervention arena, and then just kind of reviewing some of the things procedurally that we've done over the years. And then obviously for school age, Jody coming in new, evaluating the learning environment and evaluating kind of how things are operating. And again, just again, a testament to kind of where they were, and we'll speak more to kind of where we're headed with some of these on a very high level as we talk about heading into the school year, and then as to how we've had to pivot through the coronavirus pandemic. A couple other areas that I'll just mention briefly. So behavioral health, we have a behavioral health department. So it includes our behavioral support specialists, our behavioral support department, and also our behavioral health department, which is our mental health services. So gosh, for the better part of now, probably roughly 5 years, 5 to 6 years, we started a fledgling mental health program in recognition of the fact that for folks that we serve in our community that have intellectual and developmental disabilities with dual diagnosis in relation to their mental health needs, we were struggling to find we had partners, but it was a struggle to have the capacity to be able to serve those needs to the level that we would like. So we modeled a program after an example that we found in Montgomery County and started that, and we still are operating that all these years later. And one of the areas and focuses of goals and to-do items in that particular area is just, again, what is the capacity, the sustainability, really recognizing some of the, how we can continue to meet those needs in a way that we can sustain it and build capacity, but also recognize that there, with that comes, as mentioned, the sustainability aspects of that in terms of funding and things of that sort. So our behavioral health folks have continued to work on those particular high-level areas of focus as we headed into this year. And then for our community relations, they've been a big part of our self-advocacy efforts. So we have a self-advocacy group that I just am so proud of how far they've really come in terms of over the past couple years. It's been awesome to witness that personally. I had the chance to visit with a lot of those guys when we went to the Synergy conference last year, which was up in Kalahari. Just some amazing things that are happening with our self-advocacy group. They have done a great job, again, in this particular area and arena in relation to moving their meetings to a platform like this, to be able to still keep those meetings alive and to be able to keep those activities alive and to be able to do those kinds of things. And along with that, we have our activities to folks who have, again, had to really work on what do those activities look like in this new environment. You know, it's a situation that we'll talk more in depth about kind of some of the things they've been doing. And finally, we had some goals for our facilities for this year, and we've even expanded upon that based on the COVID situation. So one of the big things that we've had for our facilities this year was a renovation project of our front entrance that we got a grant opportunity through workers' compensation to be able to expand and make it much more accessible than it's ever been. And so we are very excited that that work is underway and actually should be completed here by the end of this month to completely renovate our front entrance in terms of making it far more accessible in relation to not only space, but also just the doors and the entrances throughout the entire space to be able to accommodate visitors on a much more friendly level, I guess I would say, and much more accessible level as we've had that opportunity. And I will talk more about some of the other things happening here at Wildy in response to the COVID situation. I've already kind of talked about, I added this in, this slide in. This is our fix the list slide. So, and I failed to get, and I need to get some of the more statewide numbers. We were getting those on a pretty regular basis, but again, based on the situation with the virus, I don't know if that sort of got, I'm sure obviously it's being tracked, but we haven't gotten some updates related to statewide numbers. But what, again, I just would emphasize with this particular slide is we are right on track here in Clermont County to complete the process with those that we had to work on with the assessment. So, so I'll save time and not get too much further into this one because, again, I want to concentrate on some of our discussions, again, around kind of where we are presently. So just to keep that in there, though. So this is probably the slide I'm going to move. Well, actually, I think I'm good there. This is the slide that I really wanted to take some time to just pause and answer, either questions or, just get some kind of focus in terms of kind of where we are presently. So, and I've tried to adopt, and I've just put all the different levels and departments that we have here into this particular slide to touch on, again, at very high levels as to how we've pivoted to adjust towards the coronavirus responses. So to start, we have been pretty fortunate here in Clermont County to date in terms of the number of cases that have impacted our population directly. So that is good news. We want to continue to see that happen, or continue to see that continue, obviously, in relation to ensuring the fact that we don't see it become a widespread issue, especially within our congregate living settings here in the county. We work with a number of different providers that provide residential services, in-home supports to a lot of the, obviously, the number of individuals that we have across the county that live in the county in more residential supported settings. Again, we've been very, very fortunate, and we are, continuing to hope that that will continue to be the case. Obviously, Clermont was moved in under the governor's order. It was moved into the red level of alert based on just how it was hitting some of the target kinds of that spur some of that on. But again, we are hopeful that we'll be able to sustain throughout our services and our service platforms throughout the county. And I'll talk more a little bit about some of the things we've tried to do to help our providers in this particular area as well as I get through this particular slide. It's going to start though just maybe by almost basing it on kind of the ages as we go here. So early intervention, Beth Martin is on the call, and if I miss something here or misspeak, she can help me with it. But one of the things that she and I talked about last week was in a meeting that we had was the fact that in terms of remote or supports that for our families in relation to being able to meet our families' needs in a way where maybe it's not in a face-to-face kind of place, is already been researched. It's already something that is out there in terms of some of the data to be able to show how effective that can be for families who have young children and receive services, both, be it through any kind of level of therapy to be able to help their child as they're developing in that 0 to 3 arena. So that is encouraging because as our staff have had to course correct and really kind of move into that particular area of service provision, it's a situation that it's not that there wasn't there weren't some ideas out there already as to how to do that. And so that was very helpful and is very helpful as we continue to work through that. So we obviously, as really all counties across the region and across the state have done, just for safety purposes, as you can imagine, have had to move into a situation where we're using technology for early intervention services to be able to help our parents support their young children in their development. And so we will continue to do that for the time being, obviously, because it's a situation that based on, until we feel better as to where the virus, as to where things stand and who knows how long that might go. Unfortunately, we could be facing, I hate to speculate, but we could be facing another year. I'm hoping not, but it's a situation where we certainly recognize the fact that until there's maybe a vaccine or something that provides some more promise in relation to the fact that it's becoming less widespread, we have to make sure that we're still available to our families in this particular area. And I am super proud of the fact that our staff have done that. They've done that very effectively. They've done that on the fly. And so, to be able to do that and still maintain a level of quality and satisfaction that is needed for this particular age group is huge. Because as you can imagine, any kind of situation in which we're not able to meet that in an acute way quickly. Every day is a delay for that particular child and family, and so it does warrant the fact that we really need to be prepared. And I've been very, very happy to hear again how that's transpired. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have families that are out there interested in returning to some level of face-to-face, and we recognize that, or in-person type work, and we're trying to manage through that the best we can. It hasn't been on a very large scale, but it is a situation that we recognize that for some that might be a more comforting level of service. And so what we're just trying to do is work through that in a way that the safety is maintained for that particular area. So again, just really proud of the efforts there to meet those particular needs. Obviously, moving into the school age arena, we operate a school age program here in Clermont County that serves roughly 45 to 50 kids, and been doing that for years and years and years. Jody Bailey is our principal, who has done an amazing job of working with her staff and the staff that they need immense amount of kudos to, in terms of where we had to pivot in March to be able to help those kids and families as we went into a quarantine shutdown mode, just like all the rest of the schools did back in the spring. So immense amount of creativity that went into using services like Schoology to be able to put together lesson plans and different types of things for our particular students' needs, which are very different than maybe your typical kids' needs, obviously, in relation to what their learning styles might look like, some of the things that they might be needing in terms of keeping their educational services effective and moving forward. And again, I can't give our staff and Jody enough credit in relation to doing that. But obviously now we're heading towards the new school year. And so, and just like every other school, we are faced with, looking into that, into that landscape and working on plans and ideas as to be able to meet our students' needs. One of the things that we're fortunate with here in our particular environment is we have, based on the number of kids, based on the number of staff, we have some space. So we can, when it comes to social distancing, we can do a lot of very creative things to be able to social distance our classrooms and our students in a way that's very different than your typical school that might have 25 kids in a room and do that. I mean, we serve roughly, we have maybe 6 or so to 7 kids in a room. Obviously, there's a lot of staff involved because of the needs of the children. So one of the things that we are working on diligently and will be communicating to our students' families as to what our efforts are in relation to how we're going to make every effort to, obviously we're making every effort to bring our students back here coming in August. And we'll obviously keep monitoring that as we go. Obviously we work with our local school districts to all 9 districts in the county to support those children and their needs. And obviously we've been in touch and working very closely with those districts around kind of what their plans are. Transportation obviously is a huge factor in this. So when it comes to getting kids to school and in a way that is safe on a bus, again, we're fortunate to some degree because of some routes in terms of some specialized routes to be able to afford some more social distancing on those in those vehicles. But we're going to have to keep a very close eye on all of this as we move forward. And I have full confidence in Jody and her team in terms of planning with our facilities folks here to provide for the all the necessary things that are going to be required to pertain, to create a safe, the safest environment possible for our students, our staff, and so we're going to continue to work towards those goals. We obviously are following all the ODE guidance that is coming out. So the restart plans that were sent out from the governor's office, we will obviously be looking at all the protective types of things in relation to temperature taking, face coverings, masks, gloves, the full gamut in relation to what that's going to look like to make sure that we're providing for the most safe environment possible for our children. And obviously, we're going to work very closely with our families related to that. So if there are any questions or concerns, again, our teams and our staff will be doing everything that they can to make sure that it's it's meeting the levels of satisfaction and things of that sort that will come into play as we move forward. So as you can imagine, this is a constantly changing environment. It is something that almost on a daily basis, something new comes or something else to think about. So we are working diligently as we move forward into next month in relation to providing those services for our students. Third bullet point: adult day services, vocab services, employment services, non-medical transportation. And I know we have a lot of folks on the line here today that have been directly impacted by these particular circumstances as well. And we have not been immune from this at the Clermont County Board of DD as well. So this has been probably one of the areas that I've seen, and I work pretty closely with state stakeholders in kind of keeping an eye on kind of where some of these things are headed. Really, ever since March, the circumstances for these programs have been around how to, again, maintain social distancing, maintain having things in place for the safety of those individuals who would like to, one, continue to attend a program that is in the adult services vocab arena, or two, return to, if it were a situation that either they stopped or their program had to put things on pause to kind of get things ready for bringing folks back. So again, a huge testament to the folks that are the providers that are doing this throughout our county, throughout our region. This has been an area, again, of talk about pivot points. You just can't say enough in relation to some of the things that our providers have had to do to really kind of be prepared or re-prepare themselves for this particular service provision. One of the things, so really kind of where we still exist in terms of today's environment related to these services have to do with serving folks in pods. So serving folks in groups of 10, that includes staff, again, to be able to maintain the distancing associated with social distancing and less in terms of the cross-group possibility of spread. So, making sure that the environment can meet the needs of those individuals with providing those service options for individuals that are interested in attending or re-attending. So those providers, all of them, and again, for those who are on the call that I kind of saw when we first got started, had to put together what we would define as provider assurances as to how they were going to meet these particular guidelines, and have all done so. And then the same thing applies for non-medical transportation, so which is another huge area that if, again, similar to school situations, that if a person can't get to the day service, then it makes it kind of a situation that makes it challenging if there isn't an option for them to be able to do that. And so again, our providers are working and trying to work through some of the stipulations related to, again, distancing on a vehicle, providing for the sanitization requirements, all that to be able to meet those needs. But we're not obviously by any means 100% anywhere close to a return of 100% of those folks. We're still working through and again, the patience of for our individuals, families, providers, but what we have found is we're about at 50% across the state at this point based on a return. And some of that also in relation to some of the surveys that have been out there. We still have a number of folks that are, they prefer at this point to maybe not return until they have maybe a clearer sense of kind of where the virus situation is. And so obviously respecting that as well as we move forward. So again, a testament and, a situation in which we're, really trying to work best with our providers to be able to support them. There's been some changes in relation to, for short periods of time, to adjust rates to be able to help providers, because as you can imagine, it's a situation in which without the numbers to be able to serve it, it has a huge impact on their revenue and their business model. And so it's a situation, the entire system is working to try to help to see if we can keep things together until we get a sense for where the virus is going to go and hopefully come to an end, not too long, maybe into the future. So, so we'll continue to keep an eye there and work with our providers on that front as well. On the SSA services side, we have been encouraging our employees, just for the safety factor, to continue to work remotely from home environments or away from the office for the time being. Now we're going to continue that through the rest of the summer and reevaluate that as we get into the fall. But that certainly does not mean that their work has stopped, or they're obviously not plugging forward or moving forward with working with their individuals, families, teams, providers, to make sure services are in place for those that need them, our quality is for those who need them as well, and to do our best, obviously, to make sure we're monitoring that and keeping a close eye on that. So, so again, that work continues. It works. It is being worked through using tools like what we're using today. We've used both Zoom and GoToMeeting as our kind of platforms here in Clermont County to provide for team meetings to continue. So, so that is certainly a situation in which we'll see that still play forward as we go through the next couple months at least, and we'll continue to reevaluate that as we get into the fall and into the later part of the year. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, but I think is very, very important to keep emphasizing, is the support of our providers through this. So our residential providers, we have been doing our very, very best to support those providers in our community, especially with things where we can get our hands on this equipment, personal protective equipment, masks, gloves, anything that we can get in relation through our emergency management authority, or in instances where we have found that ourselves, purchased it ourselves, and have shared that across our provider community. That was certainly initially a big emphasis to start when we really hit the ground running in March, and we continue to do that now. So it is a situation in which we have staff that continue to stay in touch with our providers around just their various needs when it comes to those kinds of things. Obviously, they're a little easier. They're becoming somewhat a little bit easier to come by, but not necessarily easy to come by. And certainly, one of the things that we want to make sure of is that they have what they need to provide the services within their particular environment. So. So again, that has been a huge area of emphasis for us in relation to working with our provider sector through this crisis. Behavioral health, again, I mentioned this already, but we have been providing mental health services and behavioral support services to a number of individuals throughout our community. Again, that has all gone on to the Zoom platform, so it is through almost a tele process now. Similar to what you might see with telemedicine, that it is a situation in which we are providing those therapy services through that particular platform and practice. And encouragingly, we have found that to have been effective. Now, obviously, for some, it might be a situation, again, based on their particular needs. We might have to be very creative around potentially doing something a little differently in relation to in-person, things of that sort. But on the, I guess on the bell curve of that, that has not been necessarily the norm. A lot of folks have been able to, and the huge testament to Melissa, who is our therapist, and folks that have our behavior support folks, who I think are a couple on the line with us today, to be able to provide those particular services moving forward. And that is a huge, as you can imagine, a huge need right now, especially when we were in especially early on in the quarantine, where folks, they're, not being able to get out at all, and how that has an impact, not only, in terms of the impact for folks' mental health and just their general kind of disposition. So that's been huge. A couple last bullet points and we'll move forward in the presentation, but activities and facilities. So activities, again, we've been, unfortunately, we're in a situation where we just have not been able to, and do not anticipate, at least for the short term, to be able to really ramp up things that we've always done with a number of the individuals, such as our things like dances, bowling, a lot of the various activities folks love so much, and it breaks our heart to have to not be able to do that right now. But just in the current situation, it's a situation that we just it just would not be wise for us to do that, obviously, in the current circumstances. But what I will say, and what I've been encouraged by, is the fact, again, which has been really awesome, is the ability to do some of the things to reach out to individuals through, again, Zoom, and different ways to be able to, and our Angie Stanton, who is our activities coordinator, has done a lot with that with groups, keeping some of those social connections together that have been so critical. So we're learning a lot through this, as everyone is. So these are things that obviously we take a stab at it. We go out there and we try it and see how it works. And then if we have to, make different adjustments and things, we do that. But I have been encouraged by the things I've heard in relation to helping people keep some level of some of the social aspects of this together through this time, as everyone has been, experiencing. And then the only other thing with facilities, which I didn't mention, but I will kind of bring it back up to bullet point 2. I did mention the fact that we're renovating our front entrance, but one of the big things this summer, which is almost hard to believe in terms of what we have done, or what, not we, because I've not been, but I've witnessed it, is we moved our entire school age hallway over to a vacated hallway in relation to some of the changes that we made with our adult services program to provide some more social distancing opportunities for when school age kids return here in the fall. And so, as you might imagine, that is a massive project that went on over the past couple weeks. And I walked through the halls yesterday and was just floored by the fact of everything that's happened within a 2 or 3 week period of time in relation to making those adjustments. The reason for that has been, and that required things like knocking walls down, doing renovations throughout different parts of the building to be able to accommodate this. The reason for this, and we're excited about it, is the fact that it's going to really cut down on cross-departmental traffic. So our school age hallway was right in the middle of our Wildy Center, which oftentimes resulted in, if students were entering the building, they were right in the same arenas like our HR, business operations. And so there's a lot of cross-departmental traffic that happens when kids are going to lunch, things of that sort. What affords this move for us to be able to do is to be able to cut down just a huge percentage of that cross-departmental traffic, so that really it kind of social distances the school age program into the areas that they have to access within the building without necessarily having to do all the cross traffic. So for example, our entrances will be, school age entrance will now be in the rear of the building, which will afford buses to be able to drop kids off without necessarily, again, having that front entrance used. And then visitors for school age will again be able to use that entrance with, again, less cross-departmental traffic. So just an immense amount of work that went into that. But again, we saw that as a way to really help to be able to bring kids back this fall. One other step to be able to really help do that. So again, a lot of kudos need to go out to Jody and her staff, the facilities staff here at the Wildy Center. I mean, just an immense amount of work to kind of make that happen. So those are some of our responses. I'm probably missing some things, and if I missed anyone in relation to some things that I'll go back and maybe make it up tonight when I do my 6 o'clock. But if there's anything, obviously we'll talk about them, or questions or comments as we get to the end of the presentation. This is a slide I just like to keep on the radar because it is such a huge issue that we stay focused on in our county and across the state. This is something, a huge effort that has been the better part of probably 4 or 5 years again into this. We have had 2 different grants that we have worked with Hamilton County in partnership with over the past 2 to 3 years to meet particular young people's needs that have very intensive needs that without the support of some of the things that are being afforded through this grant and through these partnerships may or would have to maybe access more residential treatment options that are away from their families' homes, that are away from their communities. And we know that in those circumstances, the outcomes for those are typically not great. And so one of the things we're striving for is to continue to find ways to support these children to remain in their families' homes, so that they don't potentially have to, which is another huge issue, which is on the slide here, would possibly relinquish custody to get the services that that are needed for their family member. So this fits right in with things happening across the statewide, as it relates to this population. We are seeing certainly the Department of Developmental Disabilities, I can say it, this is a major focus area for them as well, and to be able to find different ways that there may be some options residentially or respite-wise for these children to be able to, one, maybe provide for a little bit of an opportunity for a break for families, just knowing that oftentimes can be the difference between moving forward with a treatment option or custody relinquishment, things of that sort. So certainly this is something that we're going to continue to keep an eye on, continue to work on as we move forward. Finally, this is my final slide for this morning, and then I'll open it up for questions. We have a strategic plan that is due to expire. Our 3-year strategic plan is due to expire at the end of this year. So we are going to be working on our strategic planning for 2021 through 2024 here in the next 2 months. So the months of August and September, with the goal of getting a draft strategic plan to our board in the month of October. I've just listed some things here in this slide that we are just, obviously keeping an eye on, and something that when we first started talking about strategic planning at the beginning of the year, certainly now has been impacted by what are, one of the big things we're going to try to incorporate into the strategic plan is, what are we learning from this particular pandemic? What are we learning in terms of how we've had this shift services, do things a little differently? Are there things that we are learning that look like they would be important to put into practice for the long haul? Because there are some things we're learning that through some of the practices that we put together, we're creating some efficiencies that we never knew we could maybe have out there. And a lot of that comes through the electronic means. So if I don't have to use time to travel to go see you, and I can still meet your particular need or be able to meet a particular service option for an individual or family, and that's working, that might create some incredible efficiencies to be able to do more for more individuals and families out there. And so that's certainly something we're keeping a very close eye on. We would be remiss if we didn't take some of the things that, while there have been huge challenges and some of the things that we wish we would have never had to face in terms of some of the things we've been working on, we also know that there are learning things here that we need to not miss the opportunity to make sure we reflect on and then maybe potentially put into practice moving forward post-pandemic. Obviously, one of the things that always is on our radar is our levy. So we have a 5-year operating levy that expires in 2020, at the end of 2023. which is still a little ways away, but in the strategic planning process, we need to recognize the fact that that needs to be right in there. You know, obviously without that, it's without passing that or without having the revenue generated from that, would have a massive impact on our long-range forecast and the services we'd be able to render for people in Clermont County as we move forward. And of course, you know, some of the things as we sort of, again, pivot like all counties have done in relation to, you know, doing less in the service provision arena. What does it mean in terms of provider support, provider relations, advances technologically to be able to support individuals? Of course, you know, one of the big efforts last year was around our smart home and our remote support ventures. Certainly that's something that we don't want to lose. And I think one of the things that's been really awesome and seeing is how individuals that we support, for a number of individuals, they have adopted and been very comfortable with some of the technological things that they've used to be able to, again, do activities, use Zoom, things of that sort. So that is an encouragement as it relates to advancements in technology and what that might mean from a remote support perspective. And then obviously our continue with our advocacy, inclusion, integration efforts. Trauma-informed care is something that we've obviously adopted and we strongly look at in terms of making sure we're meeting the needs of our individuals and families around that particular area, but also our staff. So when we talk about things like self-care, all the things that go into providing the best possible environment for all, and that has especially been important during this time as well as we move forward. So, that's just a sort of a very large, high level kind of snapshot of things we'll be looking at as we go into our planning process. One of the things I intend to be able to do is have ways in which we can enlist help with that from obviously the people we serve, our provider sector, our stakeholders. So keep an eye out for that. It'll most assuredly be through different means, such as maybe a survey of some sort, very open-ended with ideas, asking for ideas, sharing back in terms of some of the things that folks are seeing or that need to be incorporated into a plan such as this. And also, we may do some small Zoom type of focus groups, which is, again, nice to be able to, you know, the more we get comfortable with these tools, the more these are effective means to be able to get to folks a little more easily than sometimes physically bringing people together just based on people's schedules and things of that sort. So, so keep an eye out for that as we move into the next couple of months. So that was a lot. So I'm going to stop and pause there and open it up for questions that folks may have. So please feel free to chime in with things that might be on your mind. I've also included my information. So if there's something you feel more comfortable just sending to me via email or calling me, that's in here as well. But I'll stop and pause here and let folks chime in with any questions. Well, if it sounds like either I did a decent job or it was way too much and everybody fell asleep. So no, I'm just joking. So,
we did.
So, no, but again, I just want to say thank you to everyone that tuned in this morning. We will be we've recorded this, so for folks that may have missed it. It's certainly a situation we'll be talking about, maybe getting it on our website or doing something where you can chime in later to be able to check it out again, or if there you have folks that would like to see that. So Lisa, do you have something?
I do. We did have one person who asked a question, and I don't remember if you had addressed it or not. And I took a couple of phone calls and then in meeting with Amy.
Okay.
So in relation to, I have to find it, just kind of what the county board's stance is on people that are possibly in residential settings and under stay-at-home orders, not going out a lot anymore, but about family visiting. You know, what do we have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, so visitation, that has probably been one of the most heartbreaking things through this whole pandemic, is the fact that in situations where loved ones really have, there's been such a not much of an option to be able to do that, at least in the early stages of the pandemic. There's really two different ways to look at this, or it's really based on a couple different environmental situations. So, and this gets a little more technical, but if a person is living in what we would define as more of a waiver setting, so a community-based setting where maybe they live with 3 or 4 other individuals in what we would define as a waiver-based setting, these are the Department of DD has put out guidelines around considerations for individuals, families, providers, and teams such as the SSAs to really talk through what that might look like in terms of visitation in those particular settings. And that guidance can be found on the DODD website. Really, I was looking at that a little bit, again, just to kind of come up to speed with that. A lot of that has to do with really kind of individually driven discussions amongst those that live in that home, the provider and the team, to really consider all the factors and what is the comfort level for each one of those particular people. So it may be a situation, and that requires a lot of mechanical work to make sure it's a situation all those teams are gathering to talk about that as it relates to what visitation might look like in their particular setting. So that's something that on that front. On the on the intermediate care facility, so the ICF, more of the models that are in that arena, which we have a few here in Clermont County, that's a very different discussion in relation to the guidance. They've taken a much more medical model approach, like you might be familiar with in nursing home settings. So for example, I'll just use, and this is not, it's just a personal example. So my grandmother lives in a nursing home. It's a situation in which there's no in or out. None of the family members can go visit her inside the facility, but they are permitting outside visitation. So the similar kinds of visitation requirements are in the intermediate care facility arena. And that also incorporates, to my knowledge at least, also encompasses, I should say, Southwest Ohio Developmental Center, which is in our county, so the big state operated facility up near the UC Clermont campus. So that's pretty tough, as you can imagine, but it's a situation, as you also can imagine, especially because there just hasn't been any let up on the virus. It's a situation to get virus, or for virus to be introduced into some of those settings with some of the care needs of those that live in those settings. It would be very detrimental and potentially dangerous in certain situations. So that guidance can also be found on the DODD website for individuals and families who are interested in learning more about what that looks like. So,
okay, good, thank you. We'll pass that along to her on the recording. Jessica Tubbs is on the line too, and she has, or on the meeting, and she has her hand up for a question. So Jessica, if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead.
Thanks. I just typed it in the chat box as well. I feel like it's definitely been difficult for everyone with all of the changes taking place, but I feel like it's been extra hard on the kids in early intervention. Toddlers, it's difficult to get them to sit down and be in front of a screen, and then it's the parent chasing the toddler pretty much through the entire session. And but I feel like, I don't know if there's been any thought of bringing the early intervention specialists in, but maybe offering services outdoor, because I feel like they're just falling through the cracks. And it's like, now is, you know, if early intervention is key, it's kind of like, what kind of services? I can't really offer telehealth services through with a toddler, you know?
No, I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. And that's certainly something that I know Beth and her team have been managing through in relation to really working through these particular circumstances. We have had a few instances in which we, to your point, looked at various other mechanisms to be able to maybe do something in person where it might make sense, as like you mentioned, in some kind of outdoor arena environment where that service can be done in a way that still meets the needs and the goals of the plan, but be able to do it in a way that's kind of the happy medium between the two. So certainly it's a situation that I know, you know, Beth and their team are looking at to work through. But what I also, you know, again, what I said earlier was the fact that we're still, you know, we're certainly, to your point, it's a situation in which looking at all the kind of research out there as to what it might look like in terms of some of these services rendered through that telehealth means. But what we want to do is make sure we're meeting individuals and families where they are and trying to balance those health and safety requirements, especially as we're seeing, unfortunately, the virus sort of continue to thrive on its own kind of thing. So, but I appreciate that perspective, and it's certainly a situation we need to keep a close eye on. I think this is something that we're gonna, you know, continue to monitor and research as we move forward to be able to meet these needs. So I hope that helps. I don't know if I answered it, but I certainly appreciate your sharing of that perspective. And Beth being on the line, it's helpful for her to hear it as well. So
Thanks.
absolutely. Any other questions or things that we should be keeping on our radar as we continue to move forward here? Well, again, I just want to say thank you to all of you that have joined this morning. This is something that, again, we'll plan on doing in November again, unless we need to do it sooner. So I will keep in touch with you all, but that doesn't mean you can't reach out with any other things happening out there that are of importance. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime in terms of, and if I can't answer it, I'll work on finding someone who can. So I hope you all have a good, it's a nice day out there, so I hope you all have a good rest of the day, and we'll keep in touch. Have a good day.